Hey everyone, this is Adios Amigo, and I'm doing a more general sort of what my preference is under $100 for IEMs. I found, with a few exceptions, I'm actually pretty happy to stay under the $100 price point, given some of the more expensive things I've tried. And some of the ones that I bought over $100 have in fact fallen below that price to compete with some better designs coming out in the future at lower price points. So I'm going to do this in order of price. So what you're going to see is I have one row up here, which is sorted by price, and then it continues down towards the bottom over here, and then works its way left to right. So I'll get it focused over here. And the first step in this little path, and I think it's a pretty common one for a lot of people, is the BLON BL03. I have this sort of smoky version of it. It's been kind of, I used to use these every day at work. I like them because the natural shape of them, let me see if I can get this to focus, actually fits in my ear pretty well, and it seals decently with stock tips as well, so that's always a good thing. The tone on these is to my preference, which is generally on the warm side. And the soundstage is actually surprisingly decent on these guys, and the imaging isn't terrible. It's not terribly precise, but it does a decent job of layering so that only until, it's good until you get to big band stuff where it starts sounding a little congested. But still, for how much should I pay for these? For the... Am I reading that right? Yeah, so for the $30 I paid for these, I was really shocked by how much I enjoy them. Now, the cable is kind of crap. It's hard plastic. It does have a tendency to get tangled easily. Just keeping these in storage, you can see how much it's kinked. So this ear loop is pretty much trying to bend in on itself. So it's kind of a pain in the butt in that regard. Having said that, I think they sound pretty natural, tonality-wise. I enjoy them. If you're not too discerning, or if you just want to you don't know where you want to start with IEMs, I think these are a great place to start, and then you can kind of fine-tune it from there. They're also a great gift for $30. It's like a stocking stuffer, or even if you just want to introduce someone into higher-end IEMs, these are a great way to go. Other than that, yeah, removable cables for the price is great. You get your choice of with a mic or without a mic. I don't know that the mic on these is any good. I don't remember if I did a recording on them or not. I'll have to go back and take a look, but I'll do that at some point. But yeah, so these are the cheapest ones, and I think bang for buck, they're probably tied with the next entry in the list, which is the Tin T2. No surprise there. A lot of people have been going gaga over the Tin T2s, and they are very good, I have to admit. They have a very interesting tuning where they are very bass light without sounding too bright. There's detail, there's airiness to it, but it's not aggressively treble heavy. So anyone who's bass sensitive, these are good for. The stage on these is pretty phenomenal. The imaging is pretty phenomenal. I still think there is this sense of the stage sounds large, but for some reason the sound is kind of compressed down. I feel like there's some bit of it that still doesn't feel natural to me, with the exception of certain vocals. I find that female vocals sound pretty natural, but even then, depending on how it's mastered, they can still sound just off to me, and I don't know how else to put it. But these are great. They do also have removable cables, and the cable that comes with this is fantastic. I actually throw these on much more expensive IEMs I have because I like the cable so much. So there's a lot to like about them. The stock tips are fine. The issue that I have with them in terms of wearing them is that these are actually a pretty hefty body. You know, they actually look like they weigh more than they do. I've actually done some weighing on these with scales, and they're surprisingly lightweight. But the issue for me is where the weight sits. So unlike, for instance, the BLON that we just looked at, this isn't resting on your ear with an organic shape. This is stuck in your ear canal and then hanging out the end and kind of drooping down because the weight is distributed to the back. And so I found that wearing these for a while, even with getting these pretty deep inside the canal, over time they'll start sagging and they just want to work loose naturally. So a lot of times I'll wear these out for a walk or a run. Like if I'm at the library, it doesn't really make that big of a difference, but if I'm out walking, these will work themselves loose over time, even with a tight fit, just because of the way that they sit in my ear at least. So I don't wear these that often. Even if I could, there are other ones I would rather listen to be honest. But they offer a lot for the money. And depending on the way that you prefer your tuning, I actually think that these are a great alternative if you want something on the brighter side, or if you want something that's has a little less bass in it. I think these are a good alternative to the BLONs if you just want to start off somewhere and get a feel for what bright means and what warm means. So I quite enjoy these. The next one I bought, this was more of like an impulse purchase. I honestly, if I'm going to be completely honest, I saw the design on these and I thought they were cute, and that's literally all it took. There's like a little bear on the right ear cup, and then T. So these are the Tfz S2 Pros. These have a much more V-curve shape. They do sit comfortably in the ear, but I have a hard time getting a seal with the stock tips, so I had to put some spin fits on there. The cable itself is like this not hard, but it's this bouncy kind of rubber material, which I'm not a fan of. It carries sound through it when it moves, so when you're walking around, you're going to hear it. And it has this like nasty kind of tendency to kind of stick to clothing and then bounce around some more. So once you get a little movement, you're going to start getting a lot of movement. So it does good things if you like a V-curve sound. There is some grain in the treble, but the treble's not aggressively harsh, and the bass is very pronounced. Sometimes it's good, but the extension isn't that great, so you're going to get some kind of loose slam. It's a big departure from the other two that I've discussed so far, because it's not really as balanced of a sound, and that sort of results in it working better with some genres of music and not others. The other two, not always, but generally can kind of stretch into most types of music. I think the Tin T2 less so. The BLON's a little bit more all-rounder, but I think this is much harder to enjoy certain types of music, especially because if you're into vocalists, the vocals are less pronounced. They're withdrawn, and the bass can be overwhelming in certain recordings. So I believe these ended up going for, they were $39. And so I went to the next step up of the BLONs. I went to the BLO5s. Again, I had a hard time getting a fit with the stock tips, so I ended up going with some complies on these ones. And if you don't get the right fit, it's not gonna sound that great, as is typical with IEMs. So the BLON BLO5 is basically just a better all-around version of the BLO3 in terms of sound signature. There's a bit more stage. It's just a little bit larger. The imaging is more precise. The detail and the treble are just a little bit more present. The bass extend is just a little bit lower. It's just more refined. It's a more refined BLO3. The only difference to the negative, because they have the same crappy cable, the only difference to the negative is the fit. The body of it doesn't have that same sort of organic shape. They went for like a more sort of generic IEM shape. Let's see if we can get that. Yeah, there we go. So it's just got that generic kind of oval shape that sits on your ear. It's still comfortable. It's just not as comfortable for longer listening periods as the BLO3. But it is a refined version of it. I personally think the upgrade in price is worth the investment, but I have a hard time with both the O3 and the O5 right now because I was burned on the BLO, the BL30 headphones or whatever it was called, and I still have that bad taste in my mouth. But yeah, for these, I think the O3 and the O5 are probably worth it. And one other difference that may or may not affect you, the BLO3 actually has like a solid metal feeling body, and I think the O5s are made with plastic, but it's hard to tell because it could just be chromed or something. But the O3 feels more sturdy in the hand, just feels more robust. So I don't think these are even sold anymore, which is kind of a shame. And these are the Nuforce Edc 1s, not the Edc 3s. So the 1s have a single dynamic driver, and the 3s, I think, have 3 balanced armatures. And the 1s I paid, $59.99 for? Oh, I should say, the O5s were $49.99. I paid for them. I think they have new revisions, too, with the S designation, but I don't know what the difference is. And these I paid $59.99. And these were one of my earlier sets of IEMs that I purchased, like just chronologically to me. And to be honest, I was kind of shocked with them. They have a very interesting, they're kind of like the tins, but in reverse. So the EDCs have a very warm sound signature, a very large, open stage, almost too distant. But the bass isn't overpowering, much in the same way the treble isn't overpowering for the Tin 2s on the treble side. That said, they're not the most efficient of the IEMs on there. And I wasn't a fan of the cable. It came with a crappy plastic cable, a lot like the BLONs. It just didn't feel right. It wasn't very comfortable. So I ended up getting the Me Audio and Massdrop collab balanced cables. And I was just doing it for the comfort initially. I wasn't really thinking about an improvement in the sound, but I found that going balanced actually did help make the 1s come alive. The 3s got worse, but they're not here, even though they're under the $100 thing, so I just never would recommend them. But the 1s actually came alive a little bit with the balance cable. Just a little bit more energy coming in. It seemed a little less distant, but the stage didn't feel like it shrank. Pretty interesting. And so if they still sold these, I mean, so far all of these are a solid recommend, just depending on your flavored tonality. And remember that all of my opinions too are just very subjective, biased. We all hear things differently, and that's okay. But I quite enjoyed the EDC 1s. I think for certain types of listening, they make a lot more sense. For instance, I think for gaming, they kind of have the right direction. Actually, several of the ones that we've discussed so far have. The imaging isn't as precise as some of the other ones, but it's got a good sense of stage. And if you go balanced, I kind of like the tonality. But they do sound good. I think they're pleasant. They still have a warmth to them that's almost approaching like a veiled darkness, but not nearly as bad as some of the other things I've heard, like the BLON BL30s. Anyhow, we're going to shift over here to starting to get to the more expensive ones. Of course, I have the Live 3. I've already reviewed those. You know how I feel about them. These are my go-to as of current day. I actually bounce between the Live 2 or the Live 3 and the Dunu Titans. The Live 3s have this gorgeous, warm, shifted V-curve that I just find absolutely lovely. They're not they're easy to drive. They seal well even with stock tips. The cable that came with them is fine. It's not great. It's not as rubbery as the one that came with the S2 Pros, but it's still not like I think the tin T2 is honestly like the gold standard of high value cable. But it worked, standard 2-pin. A couple of these have been 2-pin. A couple have been, I think the tin T2s are MMCX. It's a high value. I think for me, it's where value and price kind of converge at that perfect like intersection. That's the perfect balance right there. The Dune Titans are kind of an interesting case because they're not made anymore, but they kind of are, but they kind of aren't. So the Dune Titan ones have an 11mm driver. They're actually, they have ports on the front, and it almost makes them feel open back-ish. So you can actually get a little bit better of an idea of things going on around you. It doesn't have that seal where you feel completely locked off from your environment, which is why I like wearing these outside so much. I don't feel like I'm isolated from the world around me, like something could come up behind me and I'd never know it. So these are great for me, I think, as an outdoor option. One of the weak points is that this is older design, so it doesn't have removable cables. So there's no choice of making it balanced, and these are not the most efficient version of IEMs that I'm aware of. The cable isn't terrible, but it's not great. It's passable, It does carry a little bit of sound, but not much, and it's so light that it just kind of disappears. Now, the reason it's kind of available and kind of not, they don't make it anymore as far as I know. The Titan 1 is no longer in production, but they sold I think they licensed the design to FIO, and they made them under the EX1 product label. If you can find those are a little bit cheaper. The difference is that the Titans, and this is how they got their name, were made of titanium. They had a titanium shell. The X1s, I think, went to plastic and then went for like half the price. So you were able to get them for like $50 to $70, I think, if you found them. I'm not sure if they still make them. I see product pages for them pop up on occasion, but that's neither here nor there. These two are my go-to daily drivers when I'm doing something mobile. And of course, I had the number 3. Number 3 I got to compare with the Live 3. I like them. They're very similar as the Live 3, but they're still not as good, in my opinion, as the Live 3. And the reason we get to the end here now, actually, I should backtrack. Hold on. For the Live 3, I paid $63.99. For the number 3, I paid $90, and I paid $100 for these, the BGVP DMGs. Now, these were the gold standard for me, and I still love the tonality. They don't have the greatest staging. I think this great, rich, warm signature with the right removable filters. The problem I ran into, as my previous review talked about, was the filters for changing the sound signature just come loose because the threading isn't the greatest on the filters that basically screw into the chassis. The body itself is gorgeous. I love this blue hue. It's very comfortable in the ear. It seals well with out-of-the-box tips. The cable it came with is perfectly serviceable. I have no complaints about it. Everything was working for it if it just wasn't for that filter issue, and I almost lost mine at a Starbucks. So I have a hard time recommending it to people if one of the core components of the thing has a chance of going missing. In that regard, I actually very much prefer the JVC Haas series because they have bayonet attachment systems that locks them in, not threads, so there's nothing to weaken over time, and it's much more secure. And if I were doing a collection of over 100, I would definitely go for the JVCs. They would be on the list. I have them right here. I love them, but they're not. This is under $100. And to be honest, most of my time gets spent with these two, the Dune Titan ones and the Live 3s. I enjoy all of them. They all have a kind of a neat place, and when I'm looking for a certain kind of sound, they all have something. But I have a lot of different music I listen to. If you're much more focused in the type of music you listen to and the type of tonality you're looking for, you can just pick one. There's nothing wrong really with any of these per se. I think the ones with the most flaws probably are the S2 Pros, but even them, you can find the right audience for them. But for me, I think the tonality and the price to performance ratio pretty much hits max at between like $50 to like $80. I've got the Secret Garden, Tfz Secret Gardens. I've got Massdrop, Noble X's. Honestly, I'm kind of done with more expensive IEMs at this point. I don't really feel the need because there's like an arms race going on, right? Between like all these other companies. You have Canera, you have Moondrop, you have, KZ, you have Tfz. You have all these companies that are basically trying to iterate multiple products a year just for a fractional improvement. And if you keep buying into that hype, you're going to go bankrupt just purchasing all of these IEMs because they're releasing so many of them. I think you just got to pick the sound signature you like, hone in, and if that might take a few cheap ones to kind of narrow it down, that's fine. That's affordable. But I really think that like under $200 is the sweet spot. I mean, even 80 is the Live 3s shocked me by how good they were. So I would say look for that sweet spot and then just try to hone in on it. I mean, am I curious about trying more expensive ones? Yeah, but I want to try like, really funky ones like Campfire Audio. I at least there's something special about when they make an IEM and each release is meaningful. If you keep getting caught up in like the Moondrop and the Starfield and these iterative releases, I feel like you're just going to get lost in the noise. And so it's better to focus in on the products that you're looking for. And once you find one that makes you happy, you can just shut off the valve. You don't have to keep your ears open, and if you want to come back to it a couple years later, that's fine. Maybe over time you're hearing changes, or maybe over time the drivers start doing something that you don't like, and you can go back out and look. But once you find one that makes you happy, just stay with it. You don't have to turn it into the never-ending quest to spend money on a thing just to show how much you enjoy it. You can just relax with the thing you like and call it a day. And that's what I'm going to do with the Live 3s and the Dune Titan 1s. I mean, these are ancient by comparative standards to a lot of the other things. And I'm okay with that. These two make me happy. And I suggest you find the thing that makes you happy and not the things that make other people happy or the things that other people say should make you happy. And that's the end of it. I've got like 10 IEMs here. I've gone through my fair share. And I can say it's not fulfilling to spend money for the sake of spending money. Just find the ones that make you happy and call it a day. And, thanks for watching. I'm getting off my soapbox now, and have a good day.